Folks, I wanted to go over some of the key aspects of what I want you to be working on and thinking about as we move toward the end of the session and as we wrap up Essay 2. So, tonight we're going to be focusing on revision and revising. So, to start with, we have until Saturday. And I'm going to give you until Saturday evening around 6 o'clock to turn in Essay 2. So I want you to start to think about time, all right? So give yourself some deadlines between now and then so that you can work on your revision, okay? One of the best pieces of advice I've gotten and one of the best pieces of advice I can give you is to do some writing, do some drafting, and then get some distance from that. So say that this morning I worked on my draft. I could put it away for a while, come back to it this evening or even tomorrow, right? So you have some time to kind of let it breathe, let your mind focus on other things, and then come back to it. So timing, planning, scheduling is very important because I want to end strong. I want you to do your best work for this final essay. Secondly, think about as you revise, think about what you're revising for. So we want to look at our thesis and make sure it matches our purpose and clearly articulates the point that you want to make, the overall point, right? That's the goal of the thesis. Then we want to think about, does each paragraph contribute to your main point? Does your beginning introduce your topic and provide any necessary contextual evidence? So we've talked about this quite a bit. We want to look at the body paragraphs and make sure that they're connecting to the point you're making in your thesis, that there's not a disconnect between your thesis and the points of your body paragraphs. You also want to give your reader what you think they need for getting oriented with your topic and the information that you're going to be providing and the points that you're going to be making. Okay. We also want to think about strengthening our arguments. Since this is an argument-based essay, your ability to convincingly argue is key, right? And it's not just about determining that you're right and everyone else is wrong. It's also looking at the ability to present reasonable points and support them, right? So you want to make sophisticated, nuanced points and arguments and develop them with good reasons, solid reasons, and effective, clear evidence. Remember, we've talked about qualifying our information, right? Avoiding absolute statements. So we don't want to just make big blanket statements that could easily be picked apart and have holes poked in them. We want to provide substantial reasons and evidence. So you need to have enough reasons and enough evidence to support the points that you're making. And we're going to look at some examples to kind of nail this down. Okay, so how do we start to think about actually revising? One thing I want to think about is your outline. So I've asked you to do some pre-planning. I've also been thinking about reverse outlining. So I have a sample essay, and what I've done is I've kind of cut and paste the thesis and all of the main points from the body paragraphs into what I'm calling a reverse outline. So this is what it looks like. So you see I have the thesis here. Although the debate of the Earth's shape can be seen as harmless, the illusion of living in a false reality and denying science is cause for concern and can have impacts such as misinformed information and discredited facts that can be seen as harmful. So we've looked at this one before. It has a good kind of central idea. The wording's a little awkward and could be used, it could be revised and polished to make it a little more clear. But what I want you to look at is, are these points and topic sentences connecting back to the thesis? Fringe views such as flat Earth theory have always had a somewhat negative connotation. Kind of. Um, there's the negativity, and it seems like it's kind of more introductory information. A little bit. I mean, it does make a point, right? That is somewhat negative connotation, and it is qualified. So I like that. But I think there could be a bit of a tightening up to make it fit with the thesis more. Actually, I think maybe revising the thesis a bit more and tightening that up would help strengthen the connection. And then we can go through here. Um, the thing I'm noticing, and I hope you notice this too, there's a lot of mention of flat Earth in the topic sentences, but not much in terms of direct mention in the thesis, right? We have the debate of the Earth's shape mentioned, but there's more of a general discussion here. And I think since you're seeing that consistent mention of flat Earth theory or flat earthers in each topic sentence, you want to make sure that indeed the thesis reflects all that. So what I'm seeing here is a chance that this student could have taken to separate it in this kind of reverse outline that I've set up. And then it shows, you can start to see the correlation really clearly when it's just the thesis and just the topic sentences. And it helps, or hopefully will help revise that and make it clearer for the student as they go forward, right? But I think the thesis could be revised to better match the topic sentences. And that happens a lot, and that's okay. I mean, you just want to make sure you address it before, submitting the final draft. So that's a reverse outline. And I think that's a really helpful, useful strategy that you can do to make sure that your topic sentences all align and support the thesis that you're presenting, okay? The other thing I want you to think about is moving things around, right? Don't be afraid to get in there and get your hands dirty and move ideas around, move information around. You might have to cut some stuff completely, and that's going to have to be okay. Transitions. So transitions are good for a lot of reasons. They're good for moving between ideas in paragraphs, but also you can see as in the same sample essay, a transition can be used to set up an example, right? It doesn't always have to go right at the start of a paragraph. It can also work within the paragraph and go from sentence to sentence, right? We have one here also. So it's just nice to help guide your reader through the points that you're making and through the information that you're providing, okay? So don't be afraid to treat your essay with some serious eyes, right? A seriously critical perspective, because we don't have the benefit of peer review, which can be really great because sometimes a reader will ask some hard questions that you got to kind of figure out. Sentence, right? Or sorry, editing paragraphs. Does each sentence focus on one point and have a topic? Sorry, that should be. Does each paragraph? Yikes. See, now I'm revising, editing in real time, just to help demonstrate that it's important for all of us to do this, right? So we don't want to have too many ideas in one paragraph, okay? We want to have a topic sentence that announces the point, that gives the point, and helps us to determine what the focus of that paragraph is going to be. So I'm going to send the sample essay, and you can kind of see if you think that's happening or if you think the student could focus a little more and make the body paragraphs deal with one idea, right? But for example, I mean, this one that was the negative connotations, right? talking about negative connotations, getting information from the exact source itself, the flat earthers. But then it kind of goes on about NASA and doesn't really stick with this idea of negative connotations too much, right? It starts there and then it kind of goes into NASA talking about how they see NASA. And so we kind of get a little bit of a too much in one paragraph, right? Plus, he spelled ludicrous as the rapper, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you want to make sure you're not trying to do too much in a paragraph because your reader will get too overloaded with information. Transitions, we've talked about that, right? But you also want to think in terms of organization of your paragraphs. And I think using the flow chart that we looked at will be a good way to help organize your information, right? And don't be afraid to add transitions too between paragraphs, right? We've worked with transitions in class. I gave you some handouts so you could review those. But really, you want to think about how you're setting up your information. And we did a whole Blackboard Collaborate meeting on how to develop information for your paragraphs, right? We talked about using compare and contrast. We talked about using definition. We talked about different ways to classify and divide information. So go back and think about that. How are you developing your paragraphs? What are they focused around? And what is each one doing? Okay. Editing sentences. So you want to think about after you've worked with the big idea stuff and the organization and the information that you're using and the idea stuff, that's the most important stuff. Then you want to go in and really dig into the minutia, dotting your I's and crossing your T's, right? You want to make sure that each sentence is complete. You want to avoid fragments. Remember the handy check I gave you. If you're ever on the fence or wonder whether or not a sentence is complete, you can put it on the line here and then read it as one. They refuse to believe the idea that blank, right? So you fill it in, and if it doesn't make sense, then it's not a sentence, all right? Varied sentences, and this is very important, right? Are your sentences varied? So as you read through your paragraphs, does each sentence seem to have the same construction? Meaning, if all of my sentences have a subject-verb setup, it might start to sound a little repetitive and redundant, right? So the subject verb would be like, the boy runs. Next sentence would be, the cat meows. And of course, not that simplistic, but just like the consistent subject verb opening for a sentence doesn't give you any variety, right? So you can think about adding transitions or introductory phrases or combining some sentences, right? So that talks about sentence types. And we've talked about this in class. We have different types of sentences, right? We have the simple sentence that's really good for emphasis and clarity. It's punchy, it's direct, it's important for communicating key information, right? We have the compound sentence, which is two independent clauses joined together correctly. Here it's joined with a semicolon. You can use commas and conjunctions to do that. But then that's when you want to start to show the connection between ideas. Then complex sentences show that there's a connection between ideas, but there's one that's more kind of important than the other. And then there's one that's subordinate to that one, right? So the main focus of this one is consumers must become more cautious. The subordinate idea is that the credit card fraud is increasing in America. So this is in service, the dependent or subordinate clauses